story for you today. Illegal's dragging of ICE agent shows the exact danger the officer who shot Renee Good feared, expert says. This is written by Peter Pinetto from Fox News. The article reports on a criminal case involving Jose Nova Rivas, a Honduran national who was sentenced to more than 6 years in federal prison after injuring an immigration officer during an attempted arrest. According to federal authorities, the incident occurred when Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE officers were attempting to detain Melvin Rivas. During the encounter, Melvin Rivas allegedly tried to escape by driving away in his vehicle. As he did so, an ICE agent became caught alongside the vehicle and was dragged for a distance before the suspect fled. The officer sustained serious injuries as a result of the incident. Prosecutors argued that the event demonstrated how dangerous immigration enforcement operations can be for federal officers. The court ultimately imposed a prison sentence of over 6 years, reflecting the seriousness of assaulting federal law enforcement officer. Law enforcement advocates cited the case as an example of the risks officers face when suspects try to evade arrest using vehicles or other potentially deadly means. The article also includes commentary from Jessica Vaughn, a policy analyst for the Center for Immigration Studies. Vaughn argued that incidents like this illustrate why officers sometimes react quickly and forcefully. During confrontations with suspects, she suggested that when officers perceive that a vehicle is being used to escape or potentially harm them, they may reasonably interpret the situation as life-threatening. The discussion then links the case to widely debated shooting of Renee Nicole Good, a Minnesota woman who was killed by an ICE officer during an encounter earlier in 2026. In that case, the officer reportedly fired his weapon after believing he was in danger during a confrontation involving Good's vehicle. Supporters of the officer say events like the Melvin Rivas incident help explain why agents may fear being struck or dragged by vehicles during arrests. However, the circumstances surrounding Good's death remain controversial. Her family and civil rights advocates have questioned the official account and called for further investigation into whether the use of deadly force is justified. The case has drawn significant public attention and sparked broader debate about immigration enforcement practices. Overall, the article frames the Melvin Rivas sentencing as a reminder of the physical risks faced by immigration officers. At the same time, it acknowledges that incidents involving force during immigration operations continue to fuel political and legal disputes over accountability, public safety, and the proper limits of enforcement authority. Alright, let's talk about this. What the article is really about is the world you're walking into. This is about Jose Melvin Rivas, an illegal alien from Honduras who dragged an ICE agent down the road with his car. He got 78 months in prison for it. However, the expert they quote from the Heritage Foundation draws the real truth. This isn't an isolated incident. This is part of the massive coordinated 3,300% increase in these kinds of vehicular assaults on federal agents. Let that number sink in. 3,300%. It's not a few bad actors. That's a trend. That's a strategy. And this is where it gets real for you. Because it isn't just about some federal agents you'll never meet. It's about the complete and total breakdown of the basic contract that holds a society together, the rule of law. The expert lays it out perfectly. She says these aren't just spontaneous acts of rage, this is organized. She calls the people doing it useful tools. A tool doesn't have its own agenda. It's used by someone else for their own purpose. You see the same people funded by the same groups out there protesting for different causes. One day they're holding up hands off Iran signs. The next day they're screaming abolish ICE. The cause doesn't matter. The goal is the same. They are actively teaching people how to assault law enforcement. They're creating manuals, holding workshops, and spreading tactics online. The goal is to make it impossible for officers to do their jobs. They want to create a situation where enforcing our nation's laws is so dangerous and so legally risky that nobody wants to do it anymore. They're not just breaking the law. They're trying to make the law itself unenforceable. They're trying to create zones where the law simply doesn't apply. We've seen it in the autonomous zones in places like Seattle. We're seeing it in our southern border, and if you think it's going to stay there, you're kidding yourself. It spreads. It always spreads. There are consequences for fear. Let's connect it to the other case the article mentions, the shooting of Renee Good in Minnesota. The agent who shot her, Duncan Ross, was initially charged with second-degree manslaughter. The media had a field day with it. ICE agents shoot unarmed women. It fits their narrative perfectly. Well, what did they leave out? They left out the context. They left out the fact that just weeks before, Agent Ross had been dragged 50 feet by a car driven by another illegal. An incident that required him to get 33 stitches. They left out the fact that he was operating in an environment where he knew that the next car that didn't stop could be the one that kills him. So when Renee Good, who was part of a mob blocking his vehicle, accelerated toward him, what was he supposed to do? Hesitate? Give her the benefit of the doubt? Hope she was just having a bad day? No, he made a split-second decision based on the reality of his job in 2025. He acted to prevent himself from becoming another statistic. And this is the key takeaway. When you create an environment where lawlessness is normalized, where attacking officers is celebrating, you force the people on the front lines to operate from a place of fear. They have to assume the worst because the worst is happening every single day. The left creates the chaos. And then, when someone reacts to that chaos, they blame the person who reacted. The problem is, the tactic works. So you're a young guy. Maybe you're working a job trying to save money. You're not a politician. You're not a federal agent, so what do you care? You shouldn't care because this is coming to a street near you. When the rule of law breaks down, it doesn't just stay in the bad parts of town. It doesn't just affect the rich guys in Washington or the broke in Detroit. It seeps into everything. It affects the price you pay for groceries, because supply chains are disrupted. It affects the safety of the neighborhoods you want to move into. It affects the kind of world that your kids are going to grow up in. This is a war on the very concept of order. The people orchestrating this chaos believe that the American system is fundamentally unjust, and they believe that borders are racist and law enforcement is oppressive, and that private property is theft. They don't want to reform the system, they want to tear it down and replace it with something else. And they're using illegals and radicalized protesters as these shock troops. Think about your future. You would get married, right? You want to buy a house, have some kids, and live a piece of life? That's a dream, right? But how can you do that when the government refuses to secure the border? How can you do that when criminals are let into the country and given a playbook on how to attack the very people trying to enforce the law? How can you build a stable life in a country that actively is destabilizing itself? The answer is, you can't. This isn't just about law and order. It's about money, too. Every illegal alien who comes here commits a crime costs you. It costs you in court time, in prison space, in police resources. Every dollar spent on processing and housing a criminal illegal is a dollar that isn't going to fix the pothole on your street. The people in charge don't care. They see you as an ATM, and they see your tax dollars as a fund to buy votes and import new population that they think will be more loyal to them and the principles of this country. It's a betrayal. They are literally selling your birthright for a mess of political pottage. And for what? So they can feel virtuous? So they can get good press? No, this is a level of detachment from reality that it's breathtaking. They're playing political games while the country burns, and they're expecting you to just shut up and pay for it. Another part of this strategy is to make you feel like you're the crazy one. They use words like racist and xenophobe to shut you down. It won't work anymore. They tell you that you're a bad person for wanting a secure border and safe streets. They use the media and the education system to pound their narrative into the next generation's head 24/7. They want you isolated. They want you to think that you're the only one who sees what's happening. They want you to give up. But you're not alone. The first step to fighting back is to recognize this for what it is, a psychological operation designed to break your will. Don't let it. Trust yourself. Your eyes and ears aren't lying to you. The danger is real. Randy Colgood was a homosexual Minnesotan woman who died in 2026 after being shot by an Indonesian customs enforcement officer during a confrontation involving her vehicle. Her death became a highly controversial case, prompting protest media coverage and calls for investigation into the use of deadly force by federal immigration agents. The Heritage Foundation is a conservative public policy think tank based in Washington, D.C., founded in 1973. It produces research, policy proposals, and advocacy aimed at influencing U.S. government policy, generally emphasizing limited government, free markets, strong national defense, and traditional social institutions. Jose Melgar Rivas is a Honduran national who was sentenced in United States federal court to more than 6 years in prison after injuring an ICE officer while attempting to flee arrest. Prosecutors stated that he dragged the officer with his vehicle during the escape, causing serious injuries. Jessica Vaughn is a policy analyst and immigration researcher associated with the Center for Immigration Studies. She frequently comments on U.S. immigration enforcement policy and has testified before Congress on immigration-related issues. The United States Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, is a federal law enforcement agency within the United States Department of Homeland Security responsible for the enforcing immigration laws, investigating cross-border crime, and carrying out deportation operations. The agency often conducts arrests of individuals suspected of violating immigration laws, which can sometimes involve confrontation with substance. Center for Immigration Studies, CIS. The Center for Immigration Studies is a Washington, D.C. based think tank that researches United States immigration policy and enforcement. It is generally associated with advocating for stricter immigration controls and frequently provides analysis cited in policy debates. The United States Department of Homeland Security, with DHS. The Department of Homeland Security is the federal department responsible for protecting the United States from internal and external threats, including terrorism, cyber threats, and illegal immigration. Agencies such as ICE and Customs and Border Protection operate under DHS authority. Federal prosecutors, the United States Department of Justice. Federal prosecutors represent the United States government in criminal cases brought in federal courts in cases involving assaults on federal officers or immigration violations. Prosecutors from the Department of Justice pursue charges and sentencing in accordance with federal law. The article is linked in the description. Have a wonderful day. Bye.